Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Rive to receive the top 10 stocks to buy right now. Artificial intelligence products like ChatGPT have really taken the world by storm over the last 6 months, and it's going to provide a lot of disruption to a lot of technologies and industries that we deal with every day. One that I think is going to be really interesting to watch over the next couple of years is going to be the assistants that have started to be included in the devices that we use every day. So if you're in the Apple ecosystem, that would be Siri. In the Amazon ecosystem, that's Alexa. And in the Google ecosystem, that's Google Assistant. These are the kind of bots, if you will, that we interact with, that we ask questions of. And it seems like in a lot of ways, ChatGPT has made them obsolete in just a couple of months. Siri in particular, which is the one that I use, seems antiquated at this point, given what you can get out of ChatGPT. So how should we be looking at these virtual assistants? Is this something that's just going to go by the wayside for these big tech companies? Or are they actually going to get better? And are we going to be more deeply ingrained with them in the future? Let's look at that today. My name is Travis Hoium. Thank you for watching Rive Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content, including a lot of disruptive companies. And if you're interested in more content on disruption, I have links in the show notes to both the Rive Project and Asymmetric Investing, which are going to give you a lot of investing ideas in this space, including artificial intelligence. The way that I wanted to start this discussion today is actually show what ChatGPT itself says about disruption from ChatGPT. So I asked what public companies could be disrupted by ChatGPT, and it says that we don't really know for sure, but gave a bunch of ideas. And the second one that I want to highlight here is virtual assistant providers. ChatGPT says Apple with Siri, Amazon with Alexa, and Google with Google Assistant, and then also Microsoft with Cortana could experience disruption as ChatGPT completes or collaborates with other virtual assistants. I expanded this discussion a little bit further by saying, don't you think that virtual assistant providers will develop their own AI or use other AI services either through an API or open source? And ChatGPT did acknowledge that the virtual assistant providers will develop their own AI or leverage AI technologies through other means, basically repeating what I said. So not a lot of insights here from ChatGPT. And then also says that a lot of these companies have heavily invested in AI research. ChatGPT ends here by saying OpenAI, which is the company behind ChatGPT, has made its models available through APIs. So that's something that developers can use, pay money for the usage that they're using on the APIs, and then integrate them with their own technology. So something like Siri or Alexa could actually use ChatGPT itself or a very similar model. That's actually something that Snap is doing. We know that Spotify is doing something similar with their shopping app. So there's starting to be a lot of modifications or adjustments to how companies are using these APIs. But I think it's interesting that ChatGPT brought this up as one of the areas that could be the most disrupted. So I want to talk about the way that these companies are looking at it, or at least what we know about right now. Apple does not appear to be partnering with a company like Microsoft or OpenAI. What they have done is looked at including Stable Diffusion, which is another open source model, on its devices. This is actually a paper that Apple Machine Learning published in December that talks about how Apple can use Stable Diffusion with Core ML on Apple Silicon. And it really goes into, this is the big question here, is the question for any of these models is, where is the model running? What we've experienced primarily with artificial intelligence so far is those models running in the cloud. If you've used ChatGPT or Midjourney, those are models that you're putting a prompt in, and then that goes to the cloud, to a server somewhere, and then the processing goes through that compute that they pay for. But that's actually a relatively costly inference, is what they call it, to get you that answer. The more efficient way to do things is to have these models on device. And Apple says here there are a number of reasons why on-device deployment of Stable Diffusion in an app is preferable to a server-based approach. Now, obviously, this is Apple saying this, so they have a vested interest in that being the solution because they're making the devices. They could put the model that they want on device. But I do think this is an interesting way to go, especially with a virtual assistant like Siri. Siri could potentially provide faster answers if it's doing most of that compute on device, and then get some answers from the internet as well. We've seen plugins with ChatGPT and some other services where they're starting to take the models where the language comes from the large language model, but then it pulls data from the internet. So something like a Google or a Bing does. They don't work perfectly yet, but we're starting to see really rapid improvements. And so that's a possibility for Apple. I think that's the way that we should envision them going forward as a company. Google is probably going to be in a similar boat with its control of the Android ecosystem. It doesn't make most of the devices, so it doesn't have that same integration and control of software and hardware that Apple does. But since it does make the operating system, we could see it include some of the Google models on devices through the use of Android. So I would think a similar business model could be deployed in that space with the Google Assistant. And maybe it'd be a little bit easier to include some data from the internet through the Google search engine. So a little bit like what we've seen with the Microsoft partnership using Bing and OpenAI's models that are behind ChatGPT, basically pulling data from the internet and then combining that large language model, but doing it more on device. Microsoft, I think it's pretty clear exactly what they're going to do. Their assistant is not nearly as important as some of these other companies, but they've started integrating a lot of OpenAI's technology in their Office products, in Bing. So this is probably something that we're going to be able to talk to while we're using Microsoft's cloud services. But again, this is going to be something that's in the cloud because Microsoft doesn't control most devices. Maybe we see it start to make its way to Windows operating system, but that's not the way that the business has trended for Microsoft. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that left in the cloud. Alexa is something that Amazon has spent billions of dollars, reportedly tens of billions of dollars to develop, but we don't know exactly what's behind it. And if a service that's open to other developers like ChatGPT is going to be available for them to build on, that could really undermine what Alexa has done. And the interesting thing for them is that Amazon has allowed other third-party producers to include Alexa and their Alexa software in those devices. That's really been a differentiator. They're able to get their software on a lot of devices, sort of similar to what Google has done with Android. They don't have to make all the devices, but their software in the Alexa ecosystem is still part of them. Do we see that replaced with something else? Do we see that replaced with something similar to ChatGPT or one of the GPT plugins that we're starting to see emerge? I think that's a bigger threat to Amazon until we hear more. They're obviously working on something, but maybe this isn't an area where they're going to be a leader. They're going to maybe do something in the background a little bit more. But this is going to be a really interesting space to see play out because I think the assistants have developed a lot more slowly than a lot of us thought that they would. The answers from Alexa and Siri aren't as good as I think they could be. And maybe this is something that pushes them forward, whether that pushes developers internally or they're able to use open source models or APIs to improve what we get from these assistants. But this is going to be a fascinating area to watch. I tend to think that the potential for an on-device AI is really exciting. It's going to lower costs. You're not going to have need to have a subscription for it, but we'll see how this plays out. I'm going to definitely be covering this here on this channel. So be sure to subscribe to Rive Investing and let me know your thoughts about the future of these virtual assistants. Maybe we see something new emerge in the next couple of years too. That could be very exciting. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you here next time.